Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, set to hold a few extremely exciting transfer portal targets on campus this weekend. Want to talk about who's going to be on campus for Nebraska and have a conversation about the overarching goal for Nebraska in the transfer portal heading into that 2024 year. And we've had this conversation a lot. And Matt Rhule and this Nebraska program, he's been extremely vocal about it. It's not going to be a program that's going out and grabbing 30-plus players in the transfer portal and every year overturning this roster. The recipe has been very clear for Matt Rhule. We're going to recruit out of the high school level. We're going to get these guys into the program. We're going to develop them, and it's going to manifest itself on the football field. And he's done it at Temple. He's done it at Baylor. You trust the player development of Matt Rhule. But when you look at the transfer portal, it represents an opportunity to supplement your roster. And you look at your depth chart and say, hey, what positions do we need more depth? Do we need more experience? Do we need more talent? And we can use the transfer portal as a supplement in building this roster. And at the wide receiver position, that has been a target for Matt Rhule in Nebraska. And you look at the goal for Nebraska heading into 2024, it is to get the pieces in place on offense for what is potentially a very young quarterback in Rhule to thrive in. And you see so many programs make that mistake in landing a very talented young quarterback, but not giving them the protection or not giving them the weapons on the outside. Matt Rhule in Nebraska does not want to make that mistake. They want to make sure that this group is ready for a young quarterback to have some success year one. Want to talk about some of these prospects. Really excited to do so. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Nebraska fans. As always, this is a program many of you guys know I love talking about. The amount of support you guys have been showing the Nebraska fans, it's been amazing. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, you enjoy the updates, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to preface this conversation with, this is not me saying that I don't believe in some of the young wide receivers in this room. A guy like Malachi Coleman, a guy like Doss. I think these guys are going to be studs for Nebraska. What I guess I'm more getting at is, you don't want what potentially is a true freshman starting quarterback in Rhule to be working with exclusively young and inexperienced wide receivers. You want to add some experience, some guys that have shown that they can do it at the Power 5 level, have played a ton of college football in that wide receiver room as well. I think that's the best for Rhule in that young quarterback room and its growth. And the first guy I want to talk about is a Texas wide receiver, Isaiah Neyor, who has hit the transfer portal. Now, you go back 2 years ago, he was one of the more coveted wide receivers in the transfer portal coming from Wyoming, where he had 44 catches for 878 yards and 12 touchdowns in that 2021 year. He ends up transferring to Texas. He tears his ACL 2 weeks before the 2022 season, sits out the whole season as he's recovering, just didn't really get on the field much for Texas in the 2023 year. Now, what I'd focus on with a guy like Isaiah Neyor is he's a guy that kind of just got phased out of that Texas wide receiver room where you had an NFL tight end, 2 NFL wide receivers, maybe even 3 NFL wide receivers, really just struggled to find the field for Texas. But a guy that if he's back to the form that he had at Wyoming before he stopped at Texas, this could be a very exciting get for Nebraska. And one of the numbers that I'm looking at is 2 things. One, 15 contested catches going back to that 2021 year when he was an all Mountain West guy at Wyoming, 30 first down catches, and the number I have circled, 21 yards per catch during his career. This is a guy that thrives working vertically down the field. He thrives when that football is in the air, when it is time to have a 50-50 ball. These aren't 50-50 balls for Isaiah Neyor. He is very, very good at addressing that football in the air. The body control, the physicality at 6'3", 216 pounds, it's all there. And what's one of the best things you can have for a young quarterback to build their confidence and have is having a wide receiver that can go up vertically and make a play for you and make the quarterback look good. I think Isaiah Neyor is a guy that can do so. And you look at Nebraska in that offense last year, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. That was outside the top 100, and that doesn't necessarily surprise Nebraska fans, but you're looking at what to improve on in that 2024 year. Having a more explosive passing attack has to be at the top of the list, and a guy like Isaiah Neyor, who's averaged 21 yards per reception is a guy that is certainly going to add that to this Nebraska wide receiver room. Now, a few other guys that are also going to be on campus, and we've brushed by these guys, so I'll keep it short, but kind of give you guys some of my takes. Jamal Banks, who's emerged as one of the top wide receiver targets that's available in the transfer portal. And what I love about Jamal Banks, and we've had this conversation previously, not only extremely productive the last 2 years at Wake Forest, many of you guys know, as a Wake Forest alum, I've watched a lot of Wake Forest football, 100 catches, over 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns in 2 seasons. He's a guy that Wake Forest love to go to in the red zone. And you look at another thing Nebraska needs to clean up heading into that 2024 year is their red zone offense. They were 115th in red zone offense. And so at times Nebraska could move the football, but when you got inside that 20, you were kicking too many field goals. You were coming away too empty-handed. Obviously, turnovers were a problem in that. A guy like Jamal Banks with over 12 touchdown catches the last 2 years is a guy that can be a weapon in the red zone. But most importantly for a guy like Jamal Banks, and you guys know how I feel about him, 35 first down catches. This was a guy that when the chips were on the line, right, when the game was on the line on those 3rd and 6 plays for Wake Forest, Jamal Banks was the guy that they went to in terms of that big body that can create separation, can work the middle of the field, can work vertically. He's a guy that I think Nebraska never had that weapon last year. When it is 3rd and 6 and we're dropping back and we need someone to create separation and kind of move the chains, there wasn't really a wide receiver that Nebraska was going to. I think Jamal Banks could be that true wide receiver one in this Nebraska offense. And you're seeing what Nebraska's targeting, right? They want those big body physical wide receivers, right? Isaiah Neyor goes 6'3", 215 pounds. Jamal Banks, 6'4", 205 pounds. So 2 physical wide receivers that can make plays for what is potentially, again, a very young quarterback room for Nebraska in 2024. And the last guy that will be on campus for Nebraska that I am a massive fan of is former Oregon running back Dante Dowdell, who is going to only go into his 2nd year. And that's another thing you can have that conversation about. Nebraska transfer pro might be targeting some of these young guys who, yes, they've had a previous stop, but they still have multiple years of eligibility to develop within this program. And Dante Dowdell, coming from that 2023 class, essentially kind of just a more mature freshman coming into this program. And you talk about another thing you want Dylan Rhule or that young Nebraska quarterback room to have is a strong run game. Nebraska wants to run the football. Now you lose Anthony Grant, Ramir Johnson coming back from injury, Gabe Irvin coming back from injury. The running back room last year got extremely thin. I mean, you were relying on a guy like Emmett Johnson, who you all know how I feel about Emmett Johnson. I think he's going to be a stud, but I mean, a young running back to take a lot of carries, that running back room for how much Nebraska wanted to run the football, it just got thin, especially with Anthony Grant and the fumble problems that he had. You add a guy like Dante Dowdell, who goes 6'2", 215 pounds, adds that physical presence that you want from your running back position, would be massive. And you look at him coming out of high school, had over 5,000 rushing yards during his high school career in the state of Mississippi, was one of the more sought-after running backs in that 2023 class. And I think there's certainly a possibility Dante Dowdell comes in year 2 of his college football career, could lead Nebraska in rushing yards because he's exactly what Nebraska wants in that backfield. A physical back that has the long speed to hit the big play, but the physicality to run between the tackles and kind of get those hard yards and establish those body blows to opposing defenses. Those are the 3 targets for Nebraska that will be on campus. And again, you love to see the overarching goal for Matt Rhule, and that is we're building around this quarterback position. We want this whoever's playing quarterback in 2024 to have all the weapons they need to be successful in this 2024 year. Now, the last target that I would like to see Nebraska go after, and we've talked about him a lot for a lot of other programs, is former 5-star offensive tackle Lance Hurd. And for Nebraska fans, Lance Hurd, 5-star offensive tackle, may be familiar with him. Coming out of that 2023 class, he took only 2 official visits. He took 1 official visit to the LSU Tigers, where he committed to, played his freshman year. His 2nd official visit to Lincoln, Nebraska. And so Nebraska has kind of an inside track on a guy like Lance Hurd in this transfer portal. And he's going to be a guy that's garnering a lot of interest from a lot of Power 5 schools. But Nebraska, with the relationships they already have with Lance Hurd, could maybe be in the running for a guy like Lance Hurd, which would be extremely exciting. Now, you look at that offensive line position, and a lot of Nebraska fans have said in the comments, we need to continue to build the offensive line. And I 100% agree. And if you have the opportunity to get a guy like Lance Hurd, who I think is a plug-and-play starter for Nebraska, and since he's a going into his second year for multiple years for Nebraska, this would be a massive get. But the one thing that I am extremely excited about for Nebraska is that you saw that offensive line take steps in the 2023 season. It came out against Minnesota. It did not look very good. I mean, the pass protection wasn't great. The run game wasn't great. And as the season went on, that Nebraska offensive line, even though dealing with multiple injuries to starting offensive linemen in that group, continued to get better. And so you look at this offensive line and what it could be in 2024, I'm kind of optimistic about the unit that we're going to see. And that, again, you talk about what failed with the Scott Frost era. I think it started up front. You never saw that offensive line take those steps. In Matt Rhule's first year, you saw those steps getting taken. Now, a guy like Lance Hurd is somebody who I should give some background information on. The reason he's transferring from LSU is not because he's not good enough to start for LSU in 2024. It's because he wants to start at tackle. And you look at LSU, they have 2 NFL caliber tackles that are going into their third year college football. So Lance Hurd not getting the opportunity to start at tackle for LSU in 2024 was a major rule in why he's transferring. This is not some sort of 5-star offensive tackle that was a bust at their previous school. This is a guy that can play and has all the traits to be an all Big Ten caliber offensive lineman. Nebraska has a foot in the door here. Wouldn't be surprised if they take a look at a guy like Lance Hurd and say, this is an option for us that would massively improve this offensive line group. So those are some of the guys that I'm taking a look at. And again, as the weeks and days go on, we'll continue to update Nebraska and what they're doing in the transfer portal. But a big visit weekend. Hopefully we get some commitments out of it. Obviously, you wanted a guy like Julian Fleming and Kyle McCord. That shit sounds like it sailed. Isaiah Neyor, Jamal Banks, Dante Dowdell, Lance Hurd would be massive additions to this roster in 2024. Would love to hear what you guys think in the comment section. Again, as always, can't thank the Nebraska fans enough for rocking with the boys. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.